Well, now I'm really in trouble. We really have to talk about the concept of true happiness. That's why it's a problem. How much has been said about what happiness is? The search for happiness that we all have inside. That spirit of searching for happiness, where has it taken us? To whom? To one side? To whom? To the other side. And I am speaking quite generally about every single person in the world today, all of whom are constantly searching for true happiness, with each one imagining something very specific about what that happiness actually is. That's why I say we're in a problem. But the situation becomes even more complicated when we say that true happiness is exclusively discovered in God. It gets worse, because if we don't know what human happiness is, how are we going to be able to understand what divine happiness is? I repeat, we constantly strive and seek to be truly and deeply happy, yet we have not yet successfully achieved that elusive goal. God, in His will, is the source of happiness. God doesn't need to seek happiness. God is happiness. Then His happiness is truly what He is, and exactly what His divine will brings about in this world. Divine happiness. Everything that God does, and that which brings divine joy to His heart, is the fulfillment of His sovereign will. Since His will is eternal, since His will is divine, since His will is omnipotent, every act He performs forms the happiness of God. A profound sense of truly infinite happiness, a state of pure joy that exists entirely without any known limit. When we speak of the concept of the infinite, it is not merely infinite in one singular aspect, but rather it is infinite in the absolute infinity of all possible aspects, so to speak, that constitute the eternal act God performs. It is profoundly infinite in every conceivable way, infinite across all possible dimensions, and truly infinite in everything that exists. This encompasses all possible and imaginable qualities, not only those that are comprehensible for us as human beings, but also those that exist eternally for God Himself. That is the essence of His happiness. It is the divine power of His eternal will acting within Him. The Almighty God does not, and this is clearly evident to us, find it necessary to seek for happiness elsewhere, anywhere else outside of His own infinite being. Because every action that God performed generates within Him a profound sense of divine happiness. When the first man Adam was created, he was created in a state of complete and perfect spiritual unity, with or in the good of this divine will. What happened? Each and every single action that Adam carried out and completed in the divine will fully shared and participated in this immense happiness that the divine will generates and brings forth whenever it acts. By participating and engaging in it, Adam experienced and cultivated a profoundly divine sense of joy and happiness within himself and in God, because there was only one will. And he deeply shared in the experience of this happiness to the fullest possible degree that a mortal living creature on earth could ever participate, as if he were already in heaven. On earth, he was not yet in the heavenly paradise, but he truly resided in the tangible and earthly paradise. But that harmonious and perfect union of their two wills gave Adam, with each and every single act and deed he performed, the extraordinary ability to bring forth vast and boundless, infinite seas of happiness within the divine will, from which he, as a created creature, graciously partook and shared in. To what extent can a creature participate in divine happiness when it allows the divine will to act? Following these events, there came the presence of sin. Try to contemplate and imagine what an extraordinarily catastrophic and profound burden sin was, among many other things. It made Adam forfeit and lose forever that sublime state of divine happiness and grace that, as a finite creature, he possessed even while dwelling here on earth. He was left without this divine will, which was his life and his happiness. There has never been a greater tragedy in the history of humanity than original sin. When one analyzes or sees things from this point of view, original sin emerges as something truly tremendous and of utmost importance in all of human history. The singular momentous event that has profoundly and deeply influenced the entire course of all of history was the creature ultimately losing, among other things, that inherent sense of pure happiness in every single act it performed, and discovering its own existence, following the fall into transgression, with a human will completely devoid of that divine will within it, existing entirely and completely in a state of overwhelming and tremendous misery, because the fundamental human will was first created to live in union with the divine will, to receive in the human will all the goods contained in the divine will, among them happiness. When the first man, Adam, committed the original sin and subsequently lost all true happiness, no longer finding any joy or fulfillment within his own daily actions, in what specific place or state did he then desperately want to find it? In created things. Because he had lost the source of happiness within himself, which in everything he did brought him a divine happiness. He no longer had the capacity for divine happiness, because divine happiness, I repeat, is the act that comes forth from the will of God, that comes forth with all that God is, and that makes God happy. Having lost that divine will, what was an act of Adam after that divine will was lost? A pain. This was especially true if he recalled and reflected upon how what he did before the sin, which was exactly the same as what he did after, but before, every single action he took brought him a profound sense of joy and happiness. He understood that in everything, it was the will of God moving within him, and he felt the happiness that emanated, that arose in him with every act he performed. After original sin, he continued doing the same things, walking, breathing, everything that we all do, but he no longer felt anything. On the contrary, there was a pain in every breath he took, because he missed. He longed for that divine will that, with every breath, gave him a divine happiness. And now he kept breathing, but he no longer felt divine happiness, nothing more. He felt the tiny satisfaction that we can have when we breathe. We cannot truthfully claim at this present moment that simply by the act of breathing, we are experiencing a state of divine happiness. At most, we only obtain a minor sense of physical comfort from the process of breathing. But Adam, before the sin, with every breath felt a divine happiness. And why am I repeating this now, but from another perspective? God was the one who invented breathing, the heartbeat, walking, human life. And since God invented it, he invented it with divine happiness. God could not have invented breathing with human happiness because it was something that came from him, but was not him. He had to invent human breathing, but the act itself was invented by him. And that act came endowed with divine happiness because it was invented by God. Invented in quotation marks. So after losing that, Adam kept breathing, but he no longer felt that divine happiness. Well, that's where the problem starts. Now we set out to seek happiness. And thus begins the whole history of humanity, trying to find the lost happiness. And since Adam never spoke about what his life was like during that first period in unity of will with God, the creature was incapable of directing its steps toward this divine will and this divine action that forms the happiness of God. And where did it direct its steps? And helped by whom? He directed his steps toward the passions. Helped by whom? By the intense desires of concupiscence and by the adversary of the soul, who continually stoked and deceptively suggested to him that true happiness was to be found within fleeting and temporal earthly pleasures, in things of this world. Without God, the triple concupiscence, you will be like gods in the concupiscence of the soul, of thought, and of the body. In short, the capital sins. So there begins, I repeat, humanity's search for the lost happiness. And some seek it in one place and others in another. And some seek it a bit more rightly and get closer to that true source of happiness, while others look for it in a completely opposite direction. But deep down, there is a search for happiness that drives people to look for it here or there. The more rightly one directs their steps, the closer they will get to happiness, the closer one gets to God. And if one directs their steps toward evil or toward vices, seeking happiness, what do they find? Well, emptiness and the most absolute unhappiness of being enslaved by vices and passions. That cannot be called happiness. So, this person rightly seeks happiness, but has not directed their steps according to God's will and to draw closer to Him, but rather tries to find it in the most carnal part of our being because of sin. Right here, there is an entire detailed chapter that speaks very precisely about this specific point. And here our Lord says it. I have almost repeated some of His words. My daughter, human nature is driven by an irresistible force toward happiness. And this is for good reason, for it was made to be happy, but with a divine and eternal happiness. We were not even created for earthly happiness, and even less so after original sin. But yes, my daughter, nature is driven by an irresistible force toward happiness, an irresistible force. And this is for good reason, for it was made to be happy. That was its purpose, to be happy. As I tell you, in this acting of the creature in the divine will, the creature became happy in God, and God became happy in the creature. For it was made to be happy, but with a divine and eternal happiness. But to its great detriment, to its grave detriment, it becomes attached, some to one pleasure, some to two, some to three, to four. But it always remains unsatisfied and never finds in God the true delight. Because what happens is that for the sake of a pleasure, you go and seek happiness, even in an orderly way, in food, in your spouse, in your children. But these fleeting sensory pleasures simply do not possess the inherent power to completely and utterly hollow out our entire nature in that pleasure, and that is why it does not make us completely happy, but only partially. And And since it does not have the power to absorb us entirely in that pleasure, in one aspect we are happy, and in another we are unhappy. And the same can be said of anything else. Where do we seek our happiness? Even in the holiest things, holy people, a man and wife who live together in holiness, neither the husband towards the wife nor vice versa has the capacity to pour out, to channel all of that immense will, all of that profound pleasure into a singular object that could make them truly happy, much less bestow upon them divine happiness. And that is why we are always, or we are unsatisfied. Now we eat a great feast, something delicious, and at night we want another, and tomorrow we want something even tastier, and then something tastier still. What does that mean? It means that none of the previous things have managed to make us truly happy, because we have to keep looking for different ones. Why? Because they have not had the full strength and the true nature of happiness within them that would allow us to be filled with happiness once and for all. And so it is with friendships, and so it is with travel, and so it is with all things, I repeat, even those that are lawful. My daughter, human nature is driven by an irresistible force toward happiness. And this is only natural because it was made to be happy, but it was made for a divine and eternal happiness. Yet, to its great detriment, it becomes attached to what is neither divine nor eternal, because happiness was meant to be divine and eternal, not a temporary happiness, no matter how holy it might be. For the simple fact that it will end would sour that very happiness. If it were an earthly happiness, and we can see this. There are those who are happy, let's say, with their studies and their degrees, but the mere thought that they will die turns that very happiness into bitterness. Yet, to its great detriment, it becomes attached, some to one pleasure, some to two, some to three, and so on. But it always remains unsatisfied, because it never finds the true delight which would be in the things of God. It creates a void within itself, unable to extract from all creatures the happiness to which it is drawn, because that is what it was created for. It creates a void within itself and is left embittered. And even in what is holy and good, it happens that for this very reason, human inclination, instead of seeking it in God, seeks it still in temporal things, even if they are good and holy, which do not have the full power to draw the whole human nature into happiness and keep it there. That is why, when I desire to accomplish my divine works deep within their souls and make them truly happy, I begin to make everything that is human in their tastes bitter for them, so that I can give them all of my own delights. That is why the many difficulties and hardships in life, which to us appear to be insurmountable adversities, if we truly know how to live them for Jesus, become ascending steps that we gradually climb, rather than just adversities that leave us feeling bitter and defeated. In order to give them all my delights, which being innumerable, truly have the power to absorb the whole nature into divine delight. As you can see, this panorama that arose from original sin is one in which the creature is driven by this desire for pleasure toward happiness, but does not direct it toward God, instead directing it toward men, toward other creatures, toward vices, and toward acts contrary to the will of God. Many times, I have been asked how we can approach educating or try to educate children in the spiritual matters of Luisa Piccarreta. and I have answered them with this chapter. One of the most vital things to remember is that from the time when your children are still quite young, you must guide them to cultivate a deep and lasting appreciation for the things of God. And that profound spiritual awakening arising within them will inevitably and powerfully compel them to steadfastly journey upon God's sacred path and to continuously seek His divine presence. Because when that taste for divine things arises, the soul, upon encountering them, feels pleasure, feels happiness. When it finds the opposite, it feels displeasure, because it has developed within itself that taste for divine things. And that strength is what makes their own path for them, the one that is made by walking, as that song says. That would be the first secret, since we were talking about secrets this morning, the first secret for raising children. When they are younger, it is much simpler. When they are older, we already find them with so many preferences, with so many inclinations towards so many things, where they are searching for happiness. And no, in those cases, they no longer have that strength that drives them toward happiness, because they have directed it poorly. And how can we make them understand when they are already grown that they are not going to find happiness there? Yes, they do have the drive toward happiness, but they are searching where it cannot be found. How can we make them understand? Many times it is too late. It takes God coming to make their pleasures bitter, and then we have to start all over again. But when they are little and just starting out, I repeat, that's when it happens. Whoever has a taste for divine things already has a head start on the path. Why are we ourselves here? Those of us who are here. How many sacrifices to come here? How many difficulties? Why? Because of the pleasure of what? Here you are going to find the sweet treat you like. Here you are going to find the satisfaction of that desire. You did everything possible, and the difficulties seemed like nothing as long as you could get here to satisfy that desire. And I'm putting it at the level of desire, not even talking about the search for truth or anything else. No, simply at the level we're focusing on right now. That's why I repeat, for those who have children and for young people, if you manage to awaken in them a taste for divine things, they will find happiness. If you don't manage to do so, they won't find it on this earth, but only after the long stage of purgatory. That is to say, after the stage in purgatory in which the soul, through the fire of desire, purifies its taste and wants to be in heaven, purified in order to enjoy that divine happiness. So, it is very timely for young people to reflect on this, and above all, to ask God to awaken in them a taste for the things of God, so that every page they read about God becomes a balm for their soul, and with that, they will walk the spiritual path more easily. For the one who is forced to turn off the television in order to read a chapter by obligation, without having the desire, it becomes an uphill struggle. It becomes the opposite. How boring. I was better off watching American football, the game. That's why it felt enjoyable. And this applies to adults as well. Because here I am addressing my friend, that young man, and what you burn is for him. But here, all of us, and myself included, need to be attentive to the desires that arise within us and in our soul. If they are holy desires for the things of God, foster and nourish them. If they are merely desires for creatures, let them fade away. And if they are desires for sins or passions, kill them as soon as they begin to arise in the soul. How many times have I seen people go crazy with delight when they start reading Luisa and discover the essence of what Luisa is, and they can't stop reading. Blessed be God. It is an enormous grace, because when God gives you the desire for divine things, it's as if God is saying, well, it's enough that I give you that grace. Everything else flows from there. And so it is with time. Here we should pause for a moment. The time for this little talk is up, but we will continue it later.